camera. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Amy. All right. So Josh, I'm not going to repeat all that. We just want to welcome you and thank you for taking the time out to explain this project. And it is of interest to all of us. So go ahead.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the opportunity to address your guys' group. And so thank you, Pat, for the communication we've had over the last month coordinating this. And this is really a project that I'm personally very excited about, and TID as a whole, we're very excited about. So today I just want to provide a little bit of background. I have a few slides. They're really there just to show some visuals. I just like to talk, but so I'm going to show a couple of slides and just kind of walk through the process. But yeah, so obviously TID, we're an irrigation district, right? We're founded in 1887. This is our 135th year of operations, but we're also the local electricity provider for over 100,000 accounts in the area. And so when we saw this UC Merced study that came out last year that looked at if we covered all 4,000 miles of California's canals and aqueducts, what would be the water supply savings and what would be the renewable energy generated, it caught our attention. And specifically, it caught our general manager's attention, Michelle Reimers, and she was very interested in the topic. And she's a forward thinker. And so she reached out to the lead researcher and asked for a meeting and wanted to learn more. And that led to another meeting and led to months of meetings. And it got us to the point where we're at now. And so I'm going to share my screen and run through this relatively quick, and then we can get to some Q&As. So like I mentioned, the background, the UC Merced came up with this paper. We had outreach. We went and looked over different site locations throughout TID service territory, secured funding. This is kind of an outline. Selected. This is the first real public-private academic partnership that TID's entered into, which is new. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And I think most importantly, this is the first of a kind in the nation type project. And so it's really exciting, something that the oldest irrigation district in the state of California is able to pilot this concept and really be a model that we're hoping for the rest of the state and nation. So the UC Merced study, like I mentioned, it looked at if we covered all of the irrigation canals, what would be the benefit? And the benefit was over 65 billion gallons of water savings by reduction in evaporation. So these canals are all open to the environment, open to the sun, and pretty importantly for evaporation, open to wind. Wind is a very large driving factor for evaporation. And so this concept was presented to UC Merced by our private partner, which is Solar Aquagrid. And they have the founder of that company he's dabbled in all kinds of businesses throughout his life, and he really is a sustainability guru. He's kind of been focused on that, spends a lot of his time all around the world. And he was in France and looking at the canal systems there, and they're just covered with beautiful trees and covering the canals. And it really got him thinking of, I drive all throughout California and those canals are just wide open. Is there something that's being lost by that? And is there a potential that we could potentially save some water and generate renewable energy? So as I mentioned, we are an electric provider. We have state mandates to have a certain amount of our generation assets to be renewable. 60% need to be renewable by 2030. And then 100% of our retail portfolio needs to be carbon free by 2045. We are well on our way to meeting those goals through a variety of generation assets. We have a wind farm that we bought back in 2008. We have solar PPA down in the desert. We have geothermal, biomass. We have a very diverse portfolio. But we need to buy a lot of additional resources to meet these mandates. And one of the main limiting factors of us putting renewable energy in our service territory is the fact that our land value here, because of the productive agriculture that we have and our sustainable farming practices, it is so expensive, right? It's $50,000 to $65,000 an acre. And so if we need to buy 50 acres to put solar up on this land, one, we're taking sustainable farming and very productive farmland out of production, which is not something as an irrigation district we want to do. Our board would be pretty opposed to that. But then also it drives up the overall cost of the entire project, which gets passed directly along to all the ratepayers. You know, like me, like I'm sure many of you who live in our service territory, we own TID, and every cost that we have is passed directly along to our ratepayers. And so minimizing the cost to our ratepayers by utilizing existing infrastructure and land that we own in our canal system is something that we were pretty interested in. We're hopeful that this might serve as a pathway to minimize future costs to renewable energy projects. So this UC said study caught the attention of water agencies up and down the state and across the country. They got very far-ranging press on this topic, caught the attention of our state, to the point where the state said, hey, let's put some money into the budget last year to fund a pilot project. So they put $20 million to study a solar panel pilot study project. And that money was tagged to Department of Water Resources. And through our work with UC Merced and Solar Aquagrid and our willingness to really take on this challenge, we were picked as that sole pilot project to study this concept. The state obviously has a lot of interest in this technology because of the state's California aqueduct, over 400 miles, very wide canals. They're interested in this concept. And so the funding was there. We were very excited to work with the state on this type of project. It's not a grant. Initially, a lot of people said this is a grant. This is a line item in the budget. It's something that they have. We have a lot of flexibility on how this project looks. Not as much direct oversight from Department of Water Resources as if it was a grant, which is helpful. And really one of the main reasons we were selected is our willingness to say we're willing to try. A lot of water agencies didn't want to consider the option just because the way that we maintain our canals, we've been doing it for over 120 years. Our irrigation system is 250 miles of canals of all different shapes and sizes. We spend a lot of time and resources to make sure that those canals are properly maintained to deliver the reliable supply of irrigation water that our region relies on. Doing anything in those canals or around those canals that could potentially minimize that reliability or in any way impede the water delivery is a limiting factor. And to a lot of people, it's just reasons not to even try to study it, right? Like the unknowns, they're too much. You're working through really an academic process. Who knows how that can actually be implemented on the ground? A lot of red flags. We have a very innovative leadership team under Michelle's leadership at TID, willing to look at the bigger picture, look at the possibilities, and be willing to run kind of headlong into the unknown and challenge staff at TID to reimagine the way that we do some of our traditional foundational elements at TID. So really the project name, Project Nexus, water and energy integration for the future. The water energy nexus is really a catchphrase that the water and energy utilities have been using for the last 10 years. And it's really mentioned in a way historically where it takes a lot of energy to move and treat water in California. And it takes a lot of water to, in most cases, generate energy. And so how can we be best stewards of those resources as they work together? So this project builds on that water energy nexus and so many additional variables. And so on the water side, water savings, like I mentioned, is potentially there. But this pilot project that we're looking at is so small that the evaporation savings really isn't the main driving factor on the water side. The main interest we have is a reduction in aquatic growth. And so if you guys have driven around in the summer, 105 outside, you see weeds growing in the canals. It's just, it's a perfect place for weeds to grow. We spend a lot of time and money cleaning our canals, making sure that the weeds are not in the system that get in the way and block the drops or block side gates. And so the study said by covering these canals with solar panels, you're reducing the potential for these aquatic growth to happen. So that's something that we're very interested in. Will this help us reduce maintenance costs, and will this improve the water quality that's in our canal system? So really on the water side, that's our main interest and focus. On the energy side, this is, like I mentioned, a potential great source of renewable energy generation for TID. We are getting this significant funding for this project. That's funding that our ratepayers don't have to pay for. So that's an additional benefit. This was reduced costs because, like I mentioned earlier about the land costs, we're interested in a scalability of this. Like I mentioned, 250 miles of canals. If this works on this pilot project, this is could be a model for TID and how we meet some of our renewable goals. And one thing we are going to be incorporating energy storage, so battery systems, and piloting that at our site locations. The batteries we're really interested in right now. This is going to be a pretty significant amount of energy onto our local distribution grid. But anytime a cloud rolls over, we want to make sure that the drop in production on that grid is not reducing reliability for other people that are receiving energy from that specific section of our distribution grid. So we're interested in some of the voltage control and drop that we want to make sure doesn't happen. Some of the main objectives, I've mentioned these before, I'm just going to run through them. Minimize impact to our water deliveries. That's crucial. That's number one. How can we design a system that in no way impedes what our foundational mission at TID is, and that's to provide reliable and affordable irrigation water to our customers. Very basic, construct the renewable energy program, avoid impacts to farmlands. That's very important to us. Using existing right-of-ways, scalability, all of these great objectives. So site location, like I mentioned, we have a lot of canals, and we looked at all of our canals to see where it makes the most sense. Where it makes the most sense is not just from an irrigation perspective, but as you guys know, you drive around town, you see our electric infrastructure along our canal banks. It just makes sense for us. We have the land, we have the easements, we're going to put our energy infrastructure right there. And not all of our energy grid and our infrastructure, our transformers, our feeders, they don't all have the same capacity to handle additional energy on them. And that is really dependent on where it's at, what type of customers are using it. And so we looked at about 10 different locations. We had a ranking list, and we ended up with 2 site locations that made the most sense. These are some of the design requirements. This is the first in the nation concept, but putting solar panels over canals has happened in India. But the way they did it in India, it was very intrusive to the canal system. So they had pillars and pylons actually in the canals themselves, and they laid essentially the solar panels right on top of the canals. That isn't going to work for us. We want to make sure that there's nothing in the canal themselves, and we need to be able to access the canals for maintenance. So we need it to be elevated. So these are some of the kind of design requirements that we're working through and really focusing on. So the first site location is in Ceres. It's close to the freeway. It's off of Keys Road. And we're calling it the Ceres Innovation Center for a few different reasons. What you see here in yellow is the first phase of this project, and that's 4,000 feet, linear feet that just runs one direction. And so this canal is 25 feet wide. And these solar panels, this is running east to west. So these panels are going to all be facing south. And then the second phase is going around one of our water efficiency projects that we've been doing in the district called the Series Main Regulating Reservoir. So like I mentioned, we have 250 miles of canals. They're gravity-fed canals system that was designed 120 years ago. They work incredibly well and has served our region phenomenally. But gravity-fed means that there's spills in the system, spills that happen into the Merced, the San Joaquin, and Tuolumne rivers. So what we've been doing over the last 20 years is investing significant funds into making our irrigation system more efficient, capturing as much water as possible, being the best stewards that we possibly can. And this regulating reservoir and one that we have in Hillmar, they capture some of those excess spills. And it doesn't go to the river, but we're able to reuse it for irrigation purposes, saving 10,000 acre feet a year and reducing groundwater pumping in the location of these regulating reservoirs. So the second phase is going to be wrapping around the canal that goes around the Series Regulating Reservoir. And both of these sections are about 2 megawatts. And so this will be 4 megawatts in total. And it's called the Series Innovation Center because our regulating reservoir currently in Hillmar is one of the most toured facilities that we have to show efficiency, show the latest technology. And now having solar panels over the canals, this is going to be a highly trafficked area. And we want this to be an education opportunity for our local community, for schools, for our universities, Cal State Stanislaus, MJC. And so we really want to have a spot where people can come and receive the hands-on learning about solar, batteries, water efficiency. We have further plans about irrigation practices and really any type of new innovation. We want this Series Innovation Center to be that hub where people can actually come and see and learn. And we think it's going to be a real big value to our community and showcase some of the great technology that TID and our community are doing. So this is kind of a conceptual design, really looks like a carport, but using these single pillars that go right outside the canal. These are canal banks, they're all drivable. And so it's very important that the canal, the solar infrastructure in no way limits our ability for our ditch tenders and our water distribution team to be able to drive and access farmers, access side gates. And so it's a design challenge, but something that we're pretty confident we can do. Here's a conceptual design. So moving this direction goes 4,000 feet this way. This is that regulating reservoir, a very crude drawing of this. There's a lot of additional pumps and intakes over here. And these solar panels will be wrapped around of this. This is energy storage, so batteries. And what you see here is this is our transmission grid. And so it's perfectly situated to tie in directly into our electric grid. Something we're very excited about. This is a pretty crude drawing of what it would look like. We're going to try different mounting techniques. And really, this is a proof of concept. And so we're going to be piloting a lot of different technologies, different heights that the panels will be over the canals. Does that impact the evaporation loss in that canal? We're also, the UC Merced study said, because of the water in the canal system, that cools the ambient temperature, which increases the efficiency of the solar panels. And so that's something that we're interested. We're going to be testing it out. UC Merced is a very big partner in this. They have a considerable amount of the overall $20 million budget for a lot of research on our facilities, research in terms of a scalability model for TID and for the state of California to really, if this proves successful, they want to have a model that can be deployed to irrigation districts, water agencies, electric companies in the state to say, this works in these spots specifically. Because we can assume that not all canals in California are going to be able to handle solar for a variety of reasons, right? In southern part of the valley, you have land subsidence, which has impacted the integrity of the canal system. So you're probably not going to be able to do that there. But when I'm having conversations with some of our federal senators and different people in the administration, they're going to be spending money to bring those canals up to their historic conveyance capacity. So it could potentially make a lot of sense to lay some of this infrastructure for solar over the canals at the same time you're rehabbing the canal system. So they have a lot of interest in, does this work? So there's a lot of potential partners, a lot of interest. The second site location, the first one I mentioned, 25-foot wide canals. The second site is the main canal, and this comes out of Turlock Lake. And this is 110 feet wide, so significantly bigger. As you can imagine, the way that we span a 25-foot section of the canal and a 110-foot wide section are going to be very different, right? You're not going to be able to span using the same technology. So we're interested, the study looked at using a cable suspension system. That's something that we're going to be trying out at this location. It's a much smaller footprint, 500 linear feet, but because it's so wide, you actually generate 1 megawatt. So the entire project Nexus will likely be about 5 megawatts. 5 megawatts is enough to power in TID's service territory about over 800 homes for the entire year. So pretty good amount, but it is small, especially compared to our overall generation portfolio. We have a very big service territory, and so this is just a small footprint, but really it's that scalability concept. So this is a conceptual drawing of what that would look like. And this is the photo that has been publicly shared pretty significantly. So this is our main canal section. You see here that on the other site, right, we had southern facing, optimizing the solar production as much as possible. You're not going to be able to do that on a 110-foot panel. And so you have this cable suspension. So these panels are going to be facing in a little bit different directions, not really that full 24-degree southern facing optimal tilt, but still significant value in the energy generation. So research and monitoring, UC Merced has a very big scope that they're going to be studying, the water supply benefits, proving out their, their concept, their research paper. Would we see this much water savings? We're going to be researching from TID side, the construction and maintenance of the project. And then now that we have, this new generation resource, how are we going to clean these panels, right? Especially you guys all know during harvest, it's dusty. These are all right next to crops. So how are we going to clean these panels? There's quite a bit of technology about that, automation, little robots that go over. But we do think that this is an opportunity for the solar industry to come up with some new innovative solutions. Because if this works in our area, this could potentially be a boom for renewable energy and new companies to help service and maintain these unique solar structures. We're going to be testing a variety of solar panels. So solar panels, most common ones are called monofacial panels. So they collect the solar energy from the front side. Normally they have like a white backing on the back of it. But they also have something called bifacial panels, which don't have the white backing. And so that solar cell is able to generate energy from both the front and back. And so we're going to be studying kind of an A/B test of, this one section is the exact same footprint as the second section. Which one has a better generation output? And, obviously then judge the cost difference, mounting technology. So something that we're pretty interested in. And then, just from a practical perspective, we run and operate the local electric grid. We have reliability requirements to make sure the lights come on whenever we flick them on. We want to see, how does this solar battery concept, how does it interplay with our regional electric grid? Is it going to have any type of impact? And then also the scalability. Is this something on a large scale we could actually do? That's the whole presentation right there. That was quick, but Time frame, I think it's pretty close. And so I would love to take your questions because I'm sure that they're much more articulate than just me rambling on for 30 minutes at you guys.
Awesome, Josh. Well, thank you. So I've got a couple of questions already, and I want to encourage everyone, now that you've heard all of the presentation, to please add additional questions to the chat. But Janie's curious around repairs from damage, which we've spoken to a little bit. And then is the entire canal surface covered? And what about maintaining and cleaning? So
it's a
briefly, yeah.
Yeah, great questions. And really that's the main question that we're getting from our constituents and then other irrigation and water districts of what are you doing when something happens in your canal? These canals are over 100 years old. They have leaks, they have things that pop up. We have a team that jumps on that real quick and do repairs. We're selecting areas in our canal system where we don't have a tremendous amount of maintenance issues, but we have some level of maintenance issues. So we don't want the worst part of our canal systems, but we don't want the spot that doesn't require any. We want to see and test out, is there a savings in maintenance? But there are some things, especially on the main canal. We have gunite projects, which is essentially a type of material. Think of a concrete that we go and you spray the canals and it kind of reinforces the canals. If you've been in Sherlock down Canal Drive, 3 years ago, we did it in front of Richland, or Village Fresh now, in Julian. So we did a gunite project there. And so the canal looks just newer. That gunite is good for 50 years. And so by us doing that type of maintenance before we put the solar, we know that we're limiting some of those more common maintenance issues that might arise through a crack or a buckle or a leakage of some sort. But these panels, they will be at the low point, about 8 feet off the ground, and at the high point about 14 feet off the ground. So you have that natural pitch, which allows you some access from the back. And then we are requiring from all of our drop structures 40 feet between our drops of no solar panels. That way, if we're able to actually need to get equipment into the canal, we have a spot that we can get it in and out. We do something called chaining, which is really how we get the weeds out right now, where we hook up a chain link fence type apparatus to a truck and we drag the canal, and that's how you kind of pull the weeds out. And then you got guys at the end and moving out the weeds. So we've challenged our construction and maintenance team to say, we've been doing it for 50 years. It's worked out well, but do you think there's a better way we could do this? Is there a different way we could do this? Is there a way that's less mechanical, less maintenance driven? And our team, to their credit, are we could definitely look at doing something differently, which is exciting to hear and to see different ways of doing it. So that's probably the largest thing from a maintenance perspective. But we wanted to make sure that regardless, if something happens to the canal, say the canal washes out for whatever reason, sometimes that happens, right? There's a buckle, there's a lot of rodent problems. You have a canal that washes out, floods a farmer's field. We can get in there within a day, rebuild that canal, and then move water down that system. So very quickly, we want to make sure that if that buckles, now we don't have a floating solar right down the canals. We want to make sure that the integrity of that solar system is down deep enough that if something happens to the canal, we don't have to worry about something happening to the solar infrastructure itself. So now we have another hassle that we have to deal with. And from a safety perspective, obviously having all of this energy resources down in water is not something we want to do as well. So yeah, it's something that we are designing to and making it really a requirement of our engineers in structural designs to say, here are all the limiting factors, here are all the TIDs must-haves. Now design us a system that meets all of that.
That makes sense. It's a lot involved, that's for sure. Oh my gosh. I actually want to ask, I'm going to do something I don't normally do. I'm going to skip order because the next question is back to more around the care and the wear and the tear. And then I'm going to pop back to Pat's question about timeline. So Marsha's curious about the need for more oversight relative to preventing vandalism. Can the panels be individually replaced if there's a need, or will the whole covering need to be replaced?
It's a great question. You know, the panels are able to individually be removed and replaced if you have some type of issue. We have a lot of single solar panels throughout our canal system as we've moved to more automation. So we have the solar that is powering these remote gates. And what we see when we put up new systems, there's about a month of interest from people that go out and vandalize and steal them or do something to the system, and then they don't come back. We're expecting a certain level of vandalism up front, but we're building in some security features as well. You know, cameras, fencing options as well. It's something that we're definitely looking at. And yeah, to your point, we want to make sure if something happens to one solar panel, it doesn't impact the rest of the system. And really that also comes down to solar panels. In a previous life, I've sold solar up and down the valley. And so I have a pretty special interest in this. Solar panels are strung together in most cases, a certain amount per inverter. And so it's really comes down to the theory of the lowest common denominator. So if one panel is shaded on a string, all of the panels connected are reduced down to the lowest common denominator for output. And so there's a way that you can have individual microinverters on each panel that if something happens to one panel, if they're shading on one panel, it only impacts that one panel, which is something that we're designing to as well. Going to be trying out different technologies, because while it's great that we have electrical infrastructure running down our canals, there's going to be some wires, some poles that are going to cast a little bit of a shadow. Trees are going to cast a shadow during a certain part of the year when the sun's not as high in the winter. You know, you're going to have some shadow cast. And so we're designing to that. The UC said team has a team of solar experts and experts in the industry who can factor all that in and give us some good estimates. And then to Pat's comment about timeline, we're hoping to break ground this fall. Fingers crossed. We're running into, I think, what everybody is tired of hearing about is supply chain issues and trying to get things off of boats and trucks to our actual location. But we're hopeful. We're hopeful that you know, all the engineering will be done. The environmental review is reduced because this is previously disturbed land, and that's important. You know, this is land that's been canals for over 100 years, so you don't have to go through the same level of environmental review. You still do an environmental review always, but it's not taking a land that is providing one service, one value, and moving to something completely different, which requires a certain amount of further environmental review. So hopefully breaking ground this fall. Breaking ground this fall will also align well with the end of our irrigation season, so that if we need to be in the canals to build certain parts, there's not going to be water in the canal. So that's good. That's helpful. And then our hope is to have the entire project built by the end of next year. So we have a pretty aggressive timeline, but we think it's something that we think is something that we can do.
Awesome. Janie's comment or concern is around liability. She notes that people still swim in the canals in her area.
Yes. We don't want people to swim in our canals. That's trespassing technically. Technically, if you're walking on our canals, it's trespassing, although they're great areas for recreation and exercise. So a lot of people walk on them. We spend a lot of time around a swim safe program. We pay for community pools to have swim for free days as part of our Dexter the Duck education program around swim safety. But swimming in canals is something that, we have security guards that patrol canals, that encourage, let people know they can't be swimming in it. There's a lot of safety concerns. I'm from Denair. I swam in canals as a kid. I know it's not, you shouldn't do it, but we do it. It's the reality. Liability wise, we're protected. Unfortunately, occasionally there's maybe once every decade there's a tragic drowning in a canal system, and so it's really unfortunate, and we do what we can. In places where it's highly trafficked or potentially near schools, we do some fencing. However, we have 250 miles of canals. If you fence both sides, it's 500 miles of fencing. Not practical to really the conversation we just had about access and maintenance to canals. The solar is going to provide a limiting factor. Fencing directly along the canals would really limit our ability to maintain our canal system. And so it's something that we just continue to try to do a little bit more education and outreach. But yeah, the liability is something that our insurance, we have an internal insurance person, and they don't like people on the canals. Even as much as, people would like to use our canals for fundraisers or 5Ks or something like that. And we've traditionally always said no, because we don't want to take on any potential liability by giving people access to our canals. So it's kind of one of those things. If, I'm being recorded, so I probably shouldn't say some of this, but it's always better to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission.
We won't tell, Josh. It'll stay amongst the league friends.
Okay.
It's good. So Marie's question is that it appears that TID is implementing the UC Merced theories. So which agency is the effective lead in this project?
That's a great question. TID, we are the lead. We're the lead agency. We have the funding agreement with DWR, and then subcontracting with all of the various vendors, electrical vendors, construction, structural engineers, and UC Merced. There was a lot of talk early on about what's the best funding mechanism, and going through UC Merced, going through us, cleaner, more efficient to go through TID, and then have subcontractors out. Anytime that the UC has a direct funding with the state, there's a lot of steps. There's a lot of agencies, chancellor review processes, quicker, more efficient to go through us. And then also, they know that they're providing a support service to TID. So research is important, but without our project, without our direction, they'd be researching some of the concepts they think are important, but they really want to research what we in the water and energy industry are most interested in. So we've had some kickoff meetings. We actually have a meeting on Friday that's going to bring all the agencies together, really dive into the scope and how the research arm of this will really be built out.
Awesome. Marcia's asking, will the construction of the panels and the infrastructure be constructed in the United States, or will we rely on other countries to actually make the items?
Great question. It would be a combination of both. So there will definitely be components that are made from overseas, components that are American. Yeah, it's a variety. The vast majority of all solar panels are built overseas, Taiwan, China, even Switzerland and Germany. And so from just keeping the cost down on the project, we're looking for the most economically reasonable, solar panels to keep that project down, and also for us to be able to get more generation out of the same dollar amount. It was not a requirement of DWR to have all made in America standards. Most of the time, that's just a federal government requirement, not a state requirement. So since that's a state, they did not have that, which allows us a little bit more flexibility. We're obviously hoping to use local local construction team, local, electricians as much as we can for the local benefit. But we have to RFP out that process, see who submits, submits bids, and then go from there. As a public agency, we have pretty strict bidding requirements of needing to take the lowest bid most of the times, unless there is maybe a proprietary technology or something that allows us a little bit more flexibility. And so luckily we have a great purchasing team at TID who does RFPs and contracts every day, all day, and I don't have to worry about that.
That is lucky, man. The headache alone makes my head hurt. Okay, looks like a last question. So I want to make sure everybody knows we've got a couple minutes left. From my understanding, there is seed funding to manage this project. However, if the results are promising, who would fund further growth?
Great question. I could see funding from a variety of points. TID funding projects moving forward, similar to how we have funded wind and solar and our natural gas fleets, Dom Pedro. We historically haven't really sought grant funding or state funding because there's always the fear of there's strings attached. We want to be in control of our own destiny. We don't want to be told how to operate our system, right? It's that proud local control, having a local elected board of directors. There's a lot of value in that. But there's a lot of state and federal monies that, being the best, fiduciary responsibility for our ratepayers, we should be going after. And we should be trying these new technologies on somebody else's. I mean, it's all our money, right? Because it's taxpayer monies and funds. But there's some agency that's benefiting from that. TID should be trying to benefit from that. So we will obviously solicit and go after any type of state or federal grants. We're also looking at floating solar as a concept on these regulating reservoirs. And so there's some Department of Energy grant monies related to that we're interested in. But then it will just go back to, how we build generation facilities and paying for that ourselves, bonding that potentially. And water agencies, I'm sure, could do that. You could have where private companies build it and then they create a PPA, a power purchase agreement for that power to an electric industry, electric utility. And then you could have, the state funding, they're part of that. The state is with their state water project and moving water all over California. They're one of the largest and probably the single largest user of electricity in California. And so they have a lot of interest in putting solar on to reduce their load, to reduce their energy consumption. They have some pretty aggressive renewable goals as well. And so, yeah, in the federal government, they have interest. We're talking with them as well for future build out. So I can see funding really coming from locals all the way up to the state moving forward.
We had another question come in, which is Modesto Irrigation District getting involved, or are they waiting to see your results?
Not involved at this time, although they're very interested to see our results. And we've got dozens of water agencies who have reached out to us and said, I'm excited that you guys are doing it. That way you can run through all the issues and then you can tell us what worked, what didn't, best practices, and is it something that we should do? And so there's a lot of people interested in it. We're the only irrigation district right now with the pilot. And so really, we're the test pilot. So if it goes right, that would be great. And if it goes wrong, it's on us. But it's worth it. And I mentioned that this is something that the state and really the nation is interested in. Also internationally, I was on a Zoom call with an irrigation district in New Zealand a few weeks ago, and they're interested in this concept. And so really, it seems like a no-brainer, right? It's a win-win. If we can reduce evaporation, if we can save water and generate renewable energy, that meets both our water conservation goals and our renewable energy goals, where the state, where the nation, where the world we need to go, makes a lot of sense. It seems like, a lot of people said, this is great. Why haven't we done this before? And so we're hopeful that that it will prove successful. We think it's just exciting. And it's exciting at so many levels, all up and down the state. People are excited. The governor is very excited about this project. Our senators are incredibly excited about this project. And this has been probably the single best press that Sherlock Irrigation District has ever received. And so there's a lot of value in that you can't really monetize, but it brings a lot of interest into TID, not just on this project, but how we do other things. We're really leading the charge on using new technology of how we operate our water system through snow course surveys, with using LIDAR that NASA developed and that we were the first watershed to use, studying atmospheric rivers, utilizing all these new forecasting technologies that make us 97, 99% accurate in our water predictions, which is so much better than the state and federal government. And so this is highlighting our progressive forward thinking on this one project, but it's also giving us a podium and a microphone to talk about all of the great things that our district, being a local agency, that we're being able to do. So all of these other water conservation, these forecasting, the state of California, they were off in their forecasting runoff projections. You guys might have saw that in the paper last year, by over 700,000 acre feet. That's a lot of water. They were wrong. They made the wrong releases because their forecast was off. Our forecast was off 10,000 acre feet, less than 2% of error. And that technology exists. And so this platform gives us the ability to talk not just about this, but it talks about our historical stewardship of the fact that we've been providing carbon-free energy since 1923. Right? So this project builds on our historic stewardship, which is really good. From an advocacy perspective, which is one of my main jobs for TID, this is great to be able to be up there to talk about all of the great things TID does, because agriculture in the Central Valley in California has a really bad name at times. A lot of people group agriculture together that have very different farming practices. There is sustainable farming, there's unsustainable farming. There's people that have a reliable supply of irrigation water, like TID, like MID, and there's people that don't have a dedicated supply of surface water, and so they're over pumping groundwater resources. So all of these opportunities for us to talk and be in conversation, I'm able to bring in Project Nexus, but then bring in all the other great things. We're a balancing authority on the electric side, so we're a mini ISO. So when the rest of California is rolling blackouts, we're not, because we have a reliable, supply of energy and the way that we balance our system. And so it's been a really great opportunity to talk about all of the great things that TID and our local community are doing. So it's been great. Feel like I've been doing interviews about 5-6 times a week since this launched in February. I wasn't expecting to do all this, but it's been a great project, and we're really excited and looking forward to groundbreaking this fall.
All right. Well, it looks like we have no more questions. And I just want to say thank you, Josh. Your excitement is quite evident, and that's what's needed. I applaud the taking a risk and jumping in. I really like the fact that this was a line item and not a grant. Having come from education and so leery of grants because of all the little pitfalls that come with it. So we hope great success. We look forward to seeing some of it. I think having the opportunity to educate for kids all around that area, this will be a wonderful opportunity for the kids. And I think that we'll definitely want to hear the follow-up and watch this and see how it goes. So I appreciate your time. And it's very interesting, very interesting. Yeah. I hope people enjoyed it. It was informative, I think. And yeah, Any other things we want to add, or otherwise, I want to say thank you to Amy for hosting the Zoomie, and for you for really taking the time, Josh, to speak with us. So best of luck on this project. And we look forward to hearing a lot more about it. So you take care.
Anytime.
And
Thank you guys for the
everyone.
opportunity.